Oh boy, here I go purging again. Not just for the Emperor, no, as glorious as that may be, but also for the generous sponsors of this here video, Focus Entertainment. If I'm gonna be perfectly honest, my knowledge of the 40K universe is something akin to the level of a casual yet fascinated onlooker. I have passing knowledge about the Emperor, the Imperium of Man, the Space Marines that defend it against the ever-encroaching forces of chaos, and in that regard, the news that an element of 40K was going to get the old-school shooter treatment came as somewhat of a surprise to me. A surprise in that it hadn't happened sooner. Taking place on the Forge world of Graia, Boltgun sees you filling the plus-size shoes of a Space Marine whose deployment to the surface has already met a significant setback in that the dropship carrying his contingent managed to faceplant into the ground. As the lone survivor, it now falls to you to investigate the potential influence of chaos on Graia. Rogue elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus may have been screwing around with a power source once belonging to an inquisitor by the name of Drogon, and that, we are assured, is bad. Any of you that have had experience with 40K Space Marine may recognize this as an element that ties the two games together. Not to mention that whole obvious fact that they take place on the same planet, but for the rest of you, if most of this goes over your head, there's only one thing you really need to know.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
Truth be told, in the finest tradition of old-school FPS games, the plot here is largely window dressing, an excuse to take that fascinating look and feel of 40K and take it for a spin via the medium of making Chaos Cultists, among many other things, go bye-bye. That said, I cannot deny the pleasing execution of the cutscene briefings that precede each of the chapters here, reminding me very much of the briefings from classics such as Dark Forces. In general, the 40K aesthetic is seldom less than impressive to me, especially when it comes to selling the impression of the vastness of this world that you're traversing. From spires poking up in the misty distance to the monolithic structures towering above you as you get up close. When it comes to interiors, you'll often find yourself worming your way through claustrophobic hallways before opening up into grander open spaces, each effectively showcasing the trademark flourishes of 40K that fuses Gothic architecture with industrial steel. That, however, is not to say that it's all you'll be seeing here. Happily, Boltgun sees fit to vary it up over the course of its 3-chapter, 24-map campaign, and naturally this is all wrapped up in a nostalgic visual crunchiness calling back to the likes of Quake, which is amusing when you stack it up against the fact that Boltgun is actually running quite smoothly, I might add, on Unreal Engine 4. When it comes to the enemies, you've got traditional 2D pixelated enemy design here, encompassing the likes of cannon fodder cultists, chaos marines, and the varying demons spawned from the chaos gods of change and plague. It leads to a fairly wide and interesting roster of enemies, which often leads to fascinating mix-ups within combat, but eventually all things will fall prey to their ultimate end, that of being a wet pile of gibbage. Out of the many aspects that Boltgun needed to nail to bring the Space Marine experience to life, first and foremost for me would be how the Space Marine feels to control. You see, 40K Space Marines are literally a breed unto their own, towering super soldiers encased within specialized neural-linked power armor. It's nice then that Boltgun does justice to this concept by making you feel downright stompy as heck, be it through your standard purposeful movement, the hefty momentum built from when you hit the sprint button, or the satisfying slam that comes from hitting the floor from a great height. No fall damage, of course. Fall damage is for heretics. Your first taste of combat in Boltgun serves to highlight just how powerful you are and how well and truly screwed any Chaos Cultists standing in your way are. Even without the titular Boltgun, your Space Marine has access to the standard melee chainsaw. It makes light work of lesser enemies, while also carving chunks out of bigger adversaries, provided of course you mash that melee button when the sword comes in contact with them. Oh, and let's not forget the rapid charge ability, which will straight up steamroll lesser enemies with the sheer short-range acceleration of your own mass. As for the general tenets of Boltgun's combat, you'll find them to be universally understandable concepts. Bigger enemies require bigger boom. A bolter may be just a ticket for cultists and nurglings, easily one-shotting the majority of them, but not so much for escalating varieties of, say, Chaos Marines. Or the Plague Toad. Goddamn hate Plague Toads. They just got this smug look on their face. I absolutely friggin' it. Wheeling back to the Chaos Marines, aside from your standard garden variety, they can also include the exceedingly tanky Terminators, and later the up-close and personal Aspiring Champions. Those latter ones can prove especially troublesome, not just for the fact that they make you backfoot when they're all up in your grill, but for the fact that once downed, they also have the potential to straight up resurrect, gain a buff, and become a chosen champion. This is where jibbing comes into play. You see, in most cases, overkill here isn't just desired, it's outright required. Jibbage prevents aspirants becoming chosen. Jibbage prevents pink horrors from doubling down into blue horrors. And let's be honest here, when faced with a corridor packed shoulder to shoulder with cultists, horrors, or nurglings, oh brother, fetch the heavy bolter, because those walls are in dire need of a new paint job. For the most part, when it comes to your moment-to-moment gameplay here, levels are broken up into relatively straightforward exploratory sections where you'll be hunting down keys while admiring the local sights, sounds, and of course, incidental combat. For the most part, these encounters can wind up feeling fairly trivial, doubly so in the early portions of the game where it just makes you feel like an outright unstoppable war machine. But as you get deeper, the heat does indeed get turned up, and you'll start to encounter more and more of the Purge encounters. Once you've experienced a handful of these, you'll be able to see them coming a mile away. What's this? An arena-esque environment with expanded scope for movement both horizontal and vertical? What's this? Even more handy piles of ammunition kicking around? Oh, and let's not forget ample medical and armor pickups, which here are delightfully known as Contempt. All of these very subtle clues should prime you for a period of extended Dakar, but for me, I do take a particular kind of glee in seeing that Purge encounter trigger, watching the screen go a tinge of hate-fueled red, while my accompanying servo skull all but yells that the degree of heresy in the immediate area is too damn high. It's in these situations that the inspirations behind Boltgun's gameplay here are the most apparent. Basically what I'm trying to say is that if you've ever played Doom 2016, then chances are you'll feel right at home here in Boltgun's Purge arenas. In general, you'll find that most Purge arenas do follow a format, an escalating series of enemy spawns starting out relatively mild before heating up fairly significantly towards the end, and more specialized varieties of enemies in the mix will ensure you swap out to the kind of weapon that's best at dealing with a specific degree of toughness. You'll also find the occasional damage power-up tucked away during the course of some of these arenas, but infuriatingly, the majority of them I only ever really spotted after most of the killing was already done. Oh well. Guess I'll save those for my higher difficulty playthroughs, but even outside of these arenas, you'll find power-ups strewn throughout the course of a level, or occasionally tucked away within a secret. The power-ups in general can cover a wide range of buffs: overall damage dealing increases, melee damage buffs, infinite ammo, armor increases, health increases, and one of the more fascinating, the Machine Spirit power-up, which I didn't really get too much to grips with during the course of my playthrough, but apparently applies unique effects depending on what weapon you're wielding when you pick it up. Man, there's even the specialized ammo pickups for the standard bolter. What I'm saying here is there's a fair bit of variety. Now, despite mentioning that you can spot a Purge encounter coming from a mile away, that recognizable formula throughout the course of Boltgun's levels do get switched up on a regular enough basis in terms of environs and layouts that things mercifully didn't fall into that trap of feeling too samey. If anything, it's a testament to the pacing of Boltgun that it manages to keep things mostly fresh during the course of its 24-map runtime, what with its steady doling out of weaponry, enemy types, and of course, interesting places to fight them with it. I will say though that weaponry is a clear highlight of the experience. From the word go, the bolter just put a big fat grin on my face, obliterating lower tier enemies. The heavy bolter damn near gave me facial paralysis in that regard, what with its deep thudding degree of sheer Dakar. And oh man, the higher reaches of the weapon roster here do not disappoint. For me, the melter gun is a firm favorite, considering the absolute chunks it tears out of health bars and flesh, respectively. The Volkite Caliver is a beam weapon that I find absolutely hilarious to use on crowds of lower tier or unarmored enemy types, largely because when you're dealing with cultists or nurglings, it takes barely a second to focus fire before they go pop. Pretty decent against lesser plague frogs too, so you know, 2 thumbs up on that one. If I had a third thumb, however, it would be dedicated to the grav cannon. The grav cannon is traditionally vehicle mounted, and let me just consult the notes here. Manipulates the very nature of gravity itself, turning a target's mass against itself, crushing it to a pulp under its own weight, and from what I've seen when it's in action here, also drawing in other enemies in the surrounding area. All I can say to that is, damn. Outside of the guns, you've also got throwable grenades. Standard variety has a pretty significant radius and a pretty hefty amount of damage dealing when it actually detonates. Proves real good at clearing out rooms when they're clogged up with Chaos Marines. There's also crack grenades. That's a more single target detonate on impact deal. And then you've got the vortex grenade, which is quite possibly the closest thing this game has to a F you button. Actually, wait, no, this game does have a F you button.
Your only mercy is a swift death.
Well, it's more for a variety of taunts, but still.
Death is the reward.
F is implied. All in all, if I had a word to sum up the experience of playing 40k Boltgun, it would be excess. If I had 2 words, it would be glorious excess. It's a game that absolutely revels in the power fantasy of being a space marine, with gameplay that I would describe as being refreshingly bullshit free. There's no upgrade trees here or RPG light mechanics in sight. It's just you, your guns, and a world in dire need of a good old-fashioned purging. There's honestly a lot to like about Boltgun, and it does get creative with the concepts that are in play here. For example, the influence of chaos will occasionally stain the levels around you with the respective patterns, depending on whether it's plague or change, and I'm honestly a fan of how they played into that, especially towards the end of Chapter 1, where things get exceedingly trippy with how the level looks and even the design of the level itself. I was actually generally surprised to learn that the developer behind this, Auroch Digital, is actually a first-timer when it comes to dipping their toes into the realm of the retro-styled FPS. It's just nice to see a studio nail the landing with gameplay that has this satisfying heft to it, and a campaign that allows it to play in that 40k sandbox and take advantage of the interesting things you can do with it. Not to mention making a game where the starting pistol actually stays relevant. If anything, I'm quite eager to give Boltgun a second spin at some point in the future. Considering I played it on medium difficulty, I'd certainly be interested to see how tougher playthroughs affect the usage of weapons and power-ups. No doubt I'll be paying much closer attention to enemy toughness and what they do in the midst of battle. But in any case, if you found any of this intriguing and you're eager to give it a spin yourself, which I would highly recommend, you can find Warhammer 40K Boltgun right this second on platforms such as Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, and of course PC, which you'll be able to buy by clicking the link down in the description below. In any case, I hope you've enjoyed this look at 40k Boltgun. Big thanks again to Focus Entertainment for sponsoring this video. I've had a lot of fun playing it. If you'd like to help support the channel, feel free to check out my Patreon, and feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments. Till next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.